Uh, Good afternoon. Welcome from IIT Delhi. I'm Ashok Ganguly, currently the Deputy Director. And today we are meeting for the second NEP lecture. And Professor Rangan Banerjee, our Director, is busy with another meeting. Hopefully he will join soon. So today's speaker is Professor L.S. Shashidhara. As I said, this is the second talk on NEP, and many other activities on NEP is being done at IIT Delhi, and a lot of discussions have happened between faculty and all the stakeholders in the institute, and there are plans how to implement. Discussions are going on at the institute level. So these talks should help all of us understand what is NEP and what it will take for the institutions to gear up to implement uh, those aspects which are being mentioned in the document. So Professor L.S. Shashidhara is currently a professor of biology at Ashoka University, who is currently on LEN from IISER Pune. He is an expert on genetics, molecular biology, and evolutionary biology. He did his undergraduate from Harvard University of Agriculture Sciences and did his PhD from University of Cambridge. He then was a scientist at the CSIR Lab Center for Cellular and Molecular Biology in Hyderabad, and then a professor and dean at IISER Pune. He has held several important positions such as Vice President of Indian National Science Academy, President of International Union of Biological Sciences. He is also recipient of the CSIR Technology and SS Bhatnagar Prizes, the J.C. Bose National Research Fellowship. He is a fellow of the Indian National Science Academy, National Academy of Sciences, and Indian Academy of Sciences. In 2018, Professor Shashidhara was elected as associate member of the European Molecular Biology Organization, an international recognition for excellence in research in life sciences. Additionally, he is serving as chair and co-chair of various committees of Government of India and SNT organizations. He has developed and implemented several teachers training programs of MHRD, now MOE. He has facilitated training of more than 10,000 school and undergraduate teachers in adopting inquiry-based teaching methods. In addition, he has organized several alternate career workshops for scientists, particularly women scientists, in science journalism, science policy, administration, and management that have benefited more than 300 scientists across the country. So welcome, Professor Shashidhara.
Thanks, Ashok. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you can start.
Okay, great. Thanks for the kind introduction. It's an honor to be here today. In fact, I didn't realize that the audience would be mostly IIT faculty. I thought it's an outreach program. There will be teachers, college or school teachers. So in a way,
No, there are students also. There are students also,
okay.
PhD students.
Great. Okay, so because otherwise it would be too basic for the faculty of IITs. Anyway, it's a pleasure. And what I thought I'll sort of talk to you is, it's NEP is one aspect. National education policy is talked about the transformative education. Sorry, is there some echo?
No, it's okay. Shashidhara, your video is off, I think. No?
No. Okay. I can see myself.
Oh, okay. All right. Go ahead. Now it's okay.
So I think there is some. Oh.
Okay. Is it better?
Yeah.
Okay. No, I could hear some echo. I was just wondering where the problem was. Anyway, I think I'll say. So after 36 years, national education policy was framed, and the fact that in the last 36 years there has been a huge change in India and mostly the global too, right? The one is of course the post Second World War related changes, which basically led to the so-called modern education across the world. Very intense education system, state-sponsored education, state-sponsored research, and of course, a large number of philanthropic contribution, particularly in US and Europe. And most state-sponsored education and research was mostly in all countries and very intensely in US, in Japan, and such countries, and China, of course. But post-liberalization in India, which sort of coincided with, it's not an accident. It is actually coincided with the internet revolution, IT revolution. Things changed so much. The global connectivity made the pace of change much faster. Doesn't matter in which direction change is happening. In the context of a climate and environment, it could be on the worst direction. In the context of solving the problem of poverty, we maybe it's not sufficient. But still, the pace at which change is happening in the last 30 years is really very difficult to catch up, particularly people who have left behind in the education system in the context of gender or socioeconomic sections of the society. And the so-called NEP not only has to sort of fill that gap, bridge that gap, whatever has been created in the past, particularly in the last 30-40 years, and also has to look forward. And looking forward is always unpredictable, is simply because the change is happening at such a faster rate. It's how do you even predict what may happen in the future? So obviously the NEP has to sort of cater to both the sides of the spectrum, and then how to implement in a country such as ours, where the high gross enrollment ratio is still below 30%, which is the world average. And there is huge inequity in access to education. And at the same time, our presence in R&D, it's still not as you expect as it should be in any field, whether it is in humanities and social science or natural sciences and engineering and medicine. So in that context, implementation of NEP in letter and spirit would be a big challenge for India. So NEP is more like a vision document. It's a mission for the nation, and implementation of vision document in a country with all kinds of issues affecting the education system. How do you even think of effectively implementing this? So that's a question. Now, the way I'm sort of going to talk about is trying to understand the problem to some extent and see how each one of us can do something about effective implementation, and collectively what we can do and individually what we can do. There will be differences. There will be problem for example, in the context of higher education. There are colleges, there are affiliated colleges, there are autonomous colleges, there are deemed to be universities, then state universities, central universities, then centrally funded technical institutes such as IITs and ICERs and IIC Bangalore. And there are a large number of private colleges and universities. So each one of them, how they can sort of implement this. Is there really can be a generalization, or they'll have to be more customized? I think it's more of a discussion, obviously, for most of which I will not have answer because I'm not really a researcher in the context of NEP or how to implement NEP. It's only based on discussions and something what I learned from others, and something which we're trying to implement in Ashoka or in Isapune or through very different workshop that Professor Ganguly mentioned, particularly in Delhi Science and Technology Knowledge Cluster. We have started a program called DeepSeek, Delhi Effective Education and Pedagogy Cluster, under which we are continuously organizing discussion session on NEP, particularly for college teachers and college principals, and how to implement, how to understand the NEP and how to implement. Okay, let me start sharing my screen. One second. Okay, so this is meant for students here. We all learn. Whenever we talk about education, we talk about largely about learning, because as students we learn. As teachers also we learn a lot before we teach. And the learning is a continuous process, but learning is different from education. Even animals have learning, even plants can learn. How do they learn? What their memory is entrained, chemical memory in case of plants and bacteria, or the other types of episodic memory in case of animals, particularly the animals which have a proper structured brain. They have episodic memory and experiential memory and so forth. So that learning happens because we memorize the past, we modulate our behavior or responses to the same stimulus next time, and that modulation is nothing but the rest or the product of learning. But education is somewhat more deliberate process, which is, as we know, it's known only among the human species or human societies, but it was not something common just a couple of centuries ago. In fact, the so-called deliberate transmission of accumulated knowledge from generation to after generation is not only knowledge, skills, and values using the so-called schooling system. The school system perhaps was started, according to some literature we have, perhaps it started only in one or two pockets of civilizations, and in 2 or 3 ancient civilizations, including India, and only post-Renaissance it sort of picked up mostly in the Europe, and post-industrialization, of course, it became almost like industrialized. Education itself was industrialized. And it have two components: school education, higher education. School education is supposed to be transmitting the knowledge mostly in the context of language skills as well as numerical skills, something the children had to do beyond their whole family background. For example, children always growing along with their parents, and as the society is growing, once they go out, they have to start interacting with the strangers. And how to deal with the strangers is what they need to learn first in the school. For that, you need language, you need some business skills, some kind of numerical skills, and so forth. And the senior school was supposed to be a transition from what is known to what is still unknown, what is yet to be known, right? Basically generating new knowledge. And post-industrialization, even higher education became somewhat like an expanded version of school education, where the students were started learning very, very specific set of skills and very, very specific set of content knowledge, so that they are employable and can do certain kinds of work for which we need very large number of people, particularly in the industries. And once the industry started, then this urbanization happened, and the society became more complex. You also need large number of people who have specialized skills for governance, right, for the government systems. So accountants, bureaucrats, and legal experts. So that's also became part of the higher education in an industrialized setup. But that made the research a separate. The organization would do research in a separate entities. So not only in India, which is very common, but even in the Western countries, research and teaching dichotomy began post-civilization. That basically what that happened was the students didn't learn research and innovation skills as much as one expected them to, right? For India, for example, the higher education of the modern one started very late, only about 200 years ago, in one or two colleges like Presidency College in Kolkata and so forth. And it picked up at a larger scale in the beginning of 20th century, large number of new universities, colleges, mostly initiated by Indian nationalists who became more aware of the value of modern education because they went through this education system in the 19th century by the British-run organizations. They are the ones who started. For example, BHU was started, or many such universities started. Mysore University was started by Indian nationalists who thought education of that kind is very important for Indian national people or Indian societies. But in the process, the conceptual understanding of the fundamental knowledge sort of sidelined, and that became the passion only for a few select people. but it was not part of the system. And application of knowledge for societal welfare technology picked up a lot, particularly post Second World War. And most of the state-sponsored education as well as research was related to application of knowledge for societal benefit, and in all kinds of technology, including defense and providing the social good like food, nutrition, medical, healthcare, and so forth. Okay, I've already mentioned about the impact of industrialization of higher education. In the context of Indian scenario, particularly post-independent India, there was much importance was given to higher education. Nehru's ideology and the time, the way when we won the independence, the influence of the values of the time, particularly the Gandhian values, that's was the foundation for our Indian education system, which had two components. One component is that everybody should be educated, that education should be have a universal access. The second ideology is that that education in science and technology would help in solving the Indian problem, particularly the poverty and health problems. But that led to two problems. One is school and higher education got completely separated. And so school education was governed by a completely different system, which was not really connecting itself to the higher education much. Although all this higher education people, whether you are the students or the faculty, have come out from the same schooling system. But because in the design of the curriculum or the pedagogy or the vision for the school education system was somewhat disconnected from higher education, we sort of have a big gap between the school and higher education, so that the continuity is lost. Obviously, considering where we were in the time of independence, more importance was given for engineering, medicine, and agriculture, education compared to a general education like liberal arts and sciences education. There also became a dichotomy of UG and PG education because we had to catch up with the rest of the world, and we had just become independent, and we had a large population of 400 to 500 million people. So expansion of higher education in the university system was possible only through colleges, teaching colleges, and not having research along with our undergraduate education. Research integrated undergraduate education had to be ignored because of practical problems. And this dichotomy of UG and PG education, which basically is there for more than 75 years now, is another problem that we are facing in the current education system. Basically, that led to dichotomy of research and teaching. And also, because of this affiliation system, large number of colleges were affiliated to one university, and that university would conduct everything. So, and university is governed by UGC rules, right? And that's also very centralized. So not only we had a very centralized governance system of education for 2 or 3 districts together, which covered by one university. At the national level too, there was more uniformity rather than working on more customized education modules, depending on the local context, because India is a very diverse country. And this lack of autonomy had a problem like this. Because you want all students should be given equal opportunity to achieve the end results of a degree program. That is, once you write a final exam, everybody has an opportunity to write the answers correctly and get the highest marks, or whether the ranks or whatever it is, so the transcript would look good. And if there are 100 colleges, 100 different types of teachers, and your peer interactions are different, and how do you achieve this? The one way to achieve is have a centralized syllabus, have one prescribed textbook to that particular syllabus, and set up a question paper extracting the information from the textbook, so that there's nothing outside the textbook you can, or what you call, students used to call it as outside the syllabus questions was not there. And also the questions were not asking them to critically think about write something rather than memory based. and evaluation of the answer paper also done centrally by some people. So in the process, what happens is the teachers got alienated completely because the teacher's role became very minimal in the college, because textbook and the examination question paper and the answer sheets were all separated from the teachers in the classroom. This was another bigger problem that uh, sort of Indian system because of lack of autonomy of these colleges. Still, nevertheless, what we call, right? If you look at what we have achieved in India, we are the fourth largest economy now, one of the high GDP countries. In just about 70 to actually, we achieved this almost within 60 to 65 years, almost 10 years ago. And in the last, assuming that we are discussing about the Amrit Mahotsav of Indian independence, in 75 years, what we achieved is phenomenal, considering the country's population size, where we were at the beginning of independence. And all this because of the importance that was given to education, particularly in science and technology, which provided self-sufficiency in food and better healthcare. And the kind of confidence Indians got because of education, particularly in science and technology. And I keep mentioning this in many of talks when I give talks to college principals or college teachers. IIT Kanpur was the fourth organization in the country to receive a mainframe computer in those days, in 1964. The first one came in 1955 to ISI Calcutta, second one to TIFR, and more or less the same year or a year later, and a few years later it went to IIC Bangalore, and the fourth one came to IIT Kanpur. IIT Kanpur introduced BTech computer science around the same time, as soon as received the first mainframe computer. And there were no other computers for those graduates when they came out of the IIT Kanpur. Most of them went outside the country, and they are the ones who built some of the major IT industries across the world. And that confidence of Indians having contributed also brought in the investment, which opened up the economy later, because people started knocking the door of India to invest. Even if you had the so-called liberalization happened in 1970s, I don't think we would have achieved much, because now no one would have invested in a country where they were not sure what would be providing them. But 80s and 90s, what Indians contributed to the world IT industry made people to come, and by the time space research also had become successful, we had launched our own satellites and so forth. And Indian pharma industry is another phenomenal growth in 80s and 90s, which again brought in large number of people to come to India for investing in Indian companies or setting up their own business in India, because they could see well-educated people contributing to high-end the manufacturing of high-end products. All this happened, consider, it's almost like magical, considering that our literacy rate was just 12% in 1947. That means people could sort of read and write their own names. It's considered as literacy in those days. Not that they could read editorial of a newspaper and discuss what they read in a newspaper. So it's a really remarkable journey, but it's just in 2 human generations. Coming to NEP, what NEP is trying to sort of address is all the problems that I already mentioned. The separation of school and higher education, the teaching and research separation, UG and PG education separation, all kinds of problems. And then the preparation of disciplines, extreme, sort of narrow, syllabi in our education system, which basically made the liberal arts education, so-called liberal arts education or general education completely given away, right? So in that context, and then what is the future like? Future is, of course, one I already mentioned, that world is changing too fast. There's this climate change, which is already a big problem. It's not like the problem of the future, it's a problem of today, right? And both of these things and the problem of the previous one, because of increased inequality, both in socioeconomic and gender, we're also affecting the sustainable and equitable development of all nations. And one of the things is, of course, is the current mode of growth is not sustainable. Not only is not sustainable, it is extremely deleterious to climate and environment. So in a way, it will reverse the growth trend. If you continue like trying to grow like this, which is already happening, extreme weather conditions and extreme poverty is also happening, and in most part of the world, more including in India. So obviously, one has to worry about sort of going towards the sustainable development. So in that context, we have to do away with the current education system in which we simply teach what we learned some time ago to today's students who may pick up a career which doesn't exist not only today, it may not exist even tomorrow. It may after they join some job, they may have to sort of learn some new skills because their job may not exist for too long, and they may have to sort of look out for some new jobs, and which require different set of skills. So how do you even, like in 19th or 20th century, you knew exactly what you would do if you learn law, if you learn accountancy, if you learn general administration, or learn physics, chemistry, or English studies, or so forth. So what you would do now, if you learn these kind of disciplines and what kind of skills you need now, you think what is required may not be required tomorrow. It will be completely different. So, but it's not that bad. We all know as researchers. That's why the research and teaching interaction is so important. As PhD student, as faculty who do research and teaching both, or even doesn't matter, as long as you do research. In research, we are not worried about what new discoveries, how our field is changing. It's actually all the time, it's exciting for us, right? So those who went through some of the transformation in the field, for example, as a biologist, some of the techniques that currently we are using, forget about the conceptual understanding of the biology, which happened in the last 30 years since my PhD days. Beyond that, there are also huge technological, advance. PCR came after my PhD. Sequencing techniques, became more and more, high throughput and automated after my PhD and so forth. We all learned new skills, right? RNA sequence and other so forth. And we also learned a lot of data skills because the data we started generating in large amount, and we couldn't sort of handle this without a computer. And we obviously had to learn, data science skills. And so researchers are generally basically lifelong learners, right? They can continuously learn new things, continuously update their skills, and continuously apply what they have learned to solve the problems. Could be research problem, whether it is basic science problem or applied science and technology related problems, right? Same thing within economics too, right? Or even sociology. So they apply what they have learned to solving the real life problems or understanding the real life problems. For that, this typical traits that you need, the kind of skills you need, an analytical ability to verify knowledge. That's all the time we do. In fact, we continuously verify knowledge. That's what research is all about. Popperian way of continuously trying falsification, falsify the knowledge, hypothesis, and somewhere you reach what could be the reality. Ways of connecting the knowledge to the problem to identify solutions, critical thinking, self-reliance. These are something which naturally comes for people who are in research. Naturally comes with, obviously, it is some kind of a training, and that training we give to our PhD student. Hopefully, we give them, and PhD student, over time learn of some of these skills. Only thing is we need to advance this and see whether our undergraduate students learn these skills. That's the only way to change their future and increase their opportunity. And that's exactly what NEP wants. This is what NEP wants. NEP is not asking for anything which a human cannot do, human cannot achieve, which is some part of our education system, but it is limited to only for among the research fraternity, and it is not part of a general education system. It's true for most part of the world, more so in India. Obviously, in the context of society, what we want to achieve is sustainable, achieving the sustainable developmental goals, with certain time scale, right? Obviously, some of them are is a continuous effort. Let's say by 2030 we want to achieve this, by 2050 we want to achieve this, by 2070 Prime Minister announced in the Glasgow summit on climate change saying that by 2070 India will become carbon neutral and so forth, right? So in that context, how do we achieve each one of these goals at certain shortest time scale, because we cannot wait for long in achieving these goals, because the goal goes farther and farther. It's like a mirage, because the problem becomes larger if you delay solving the problem today. For that, our students need to develop sustainability skills. So these are the two major ones. The first set of skills I already mentioned, which every researcher will have anyway. Second is our students should have sustainability skills, because that's the only way they can have a healthy future living. And the education system should have clear understanding that knowledge is global. I know this is sometimes controversial in the Indian context currently, particularly in the school education. And one we have to clear is knowledge has to go through continuous process of verification and process of falsification, and knowledge gets refined and refined. And we know now how much knowledge is refined, particularly in the field of sciences. We are very clear, because science is the progress. Knowledge is using the methods of using scientific methods. But knowledge is global, whether it is in social science, economics, or in natural sciences, obviously. But the problems are always local. So if you want to apply whatever is knowledge in solving real life problem, our students need to develop those skills, that they need to have an understanding of the understanding of the impact of the problem locally. Let's say climate change or environmental degradation, it may not be exactly the same. Climate change can cause extreme cold in some places, or extreme heat in some places, or dry weather, or highly wet weather in some places. Extreme weathers are possible because of climate change. So one has to really understand what is the impact of a particular global problem in the local context, and try to solve the problem locally. More customized solutions are the key. We should not look for one global solution to all the problems, which is impossible. We already know no one is going to work for someone else. Russia's invasion of Ukraine is a very clear example that everybody, even in the modern world in 21st century, is still inward looking. So hopefully we educationists, we researchers who are always globally connected and so-called global citizens, ensure that the knowledge which is supposed to be global, we train our students such a way that this global knowledge is used to solve the local problems, right? And those are the kind of the background information on which NEP has to be looked into. There are certain specific in letter what NEP says. One is inclusivity and equitable access, which is again, I'll going to come to that later. The quality and integrity of which already discussed at length. Learner-centered pedagogy, obviously this is exactly what I mentioned, that it's not about what we learned yesterday that we need to transfer the knowledge and the values. It's about what the students would need. More than what the students would need is what the society needs. But there is always a give and take. There is an individual aspiration and the societal compulsions. Because we have to live as a society. Society demands certain things. Like here, what is the society? Let's say NEP is an outcome of the society, right? The government, public, they all debated, and then let's say an NEP was framed and it was an act of parliament. So obviously it was accepted by the whole country. But the next part is every individual still has certain aspirations and which may not meet the NEP goals. So how to ensure that individual freedom is protected, what they want, they can do. At the same time, societal goals are also achieved. And that's where the pedagogy comes into picture. In fact, the global knowledge versus local problem will sort of meet that requirement too. And of course, what kind of skills and values and so forth is already written. It's sort of universal, and there is not time specific. And it's these kind of values are required all the time. And as we teachers, one good thing about NEP is, irrespective of how much of digital pedagogy, online courses, self-learning we're talking about, teachers are still central to educational reforms, because without teachers, particularly the fact that only 26% of the eligible students are going to higher education, and that number is going to increase enormously. People have seen the value of education. A parent, maybe a poorest of the poor, somehow they want to save money and send their children to higher education, make sure that they are not going to have the same problem of poverty that they are, suffering with. So in that context, we still need large number of good teachers to sort of handhold the students through this journey of their education. And of course, many of our teachers, not in places like IITs with our ICERs, most college teachers, which are going to cater to the largest number of students in this country, almost like close to 90% of our students go through colleges, where mostly it's teaching and there's hardly any research. And those teachers are the ones who need to be, in addition to, we all need to learn to some extent, irrespective of from which background we come on, which kind of organization we are. As teachers, we need to be ready to meet the requirement of the future, and how to make sure that all teachers who are in this current college system are also sort of reoriented and trained to do this. So here we teachers training, and followed by how they can use digital pedagogical methods, where digital pedagogical methods is only as a teaching aid, something which we need to sort of learn. And during the implementation, these problems will come now. This is exactly what we need to look into it. In fact, this particular slide is the most important slide, what important content in the NEP, where the challenge is in the implementation, right? Because here where the human interventions, irrespective of what we talk about digital resource and everything, finally the teacher's role becomes more important, and also because they want to do away with the sort of affiliated college system, give more autonomy to colleges. That means our teachers should be able to frame the curriculum, write the syllabi, and also teach the way they want, and also they assess in the students to give the degree and so forth, award the degree. In that context, teachers' role becomes even more important. Another aspect is the liberal arts program. When we say liberal arts, it's two aspects to it. One is it's opening up of the mind. It's not simply arts. Particularly, I'm sure all of the faculty here, they know, if the students, there's a general tendency, people think that liberal arts means it's about learning arts as a discipline, but it's not. It's simply art of being liberal, right? And how do you become liberal? Because you open up your mind through education. That's what liberal arts program is all about. And like, for example, most of the American universities are liberal arts universities, where a student can take a course in English literature or in, for example, string theory in physics, right, in the same semester. And they can transition from one discipline to another discipline without any problem. Many people have done the 4-year degree program majoring in social science or humanities, and later shifted to sciences and went on to become famous scientists. Michael Bishop is an example, who studied whole of 4-year degree program, mostly English literature, but later he studied medicine and then became a Nobel laureate, by doing some landmark discoveries. And that liberal art program is very, very important, where students are exposed to variety of different ways of looking at the society, whether we look into the ourselves, because the perception and opinion and the truth are completely different. So what we perceive, like we perceive what all 7 billion people on earth, or every individual who ever lived on earth, would every day see the same thing, that sun rises from the east and sets in the west. But we know by the scientific methods, which is completely counterintuitive, that it is not the sun which is moving, it's the earth which is moving, around itself, right? And this is the best example to say that our sensory perception and the opinion of others and the perception of others, right? It itself is not enough. This kind of debate itself is not enough to understand the reality, for which we need to use a variety of different types of methods. It's very important that social scientists or economics or natural sciences people also learn from each other very different methods of understanding the world, right? Both qualitative and the quantitative methods. Okay, I'll be done in another 5 minutes or so. We can have some questions. So, for example, in how do you, for example, provide science education in a liberal arts model, right? For example, this is an Ashoka model, right? So we need to talk about what is scientific inquiry. Why, for example, science? Is it science about learning physics, chemistry, math, and biology, or is science is about a set of methods? What scientific inquiry is what is more important. It's not about whether it is the earth which rotates around the earth or sun is moving around the earth. It is the method that is more important, which can be used even in economics, right? And so that's one aspect. The second is, let's say, even when you teach sciences, right, it's very important that we connect the physical world to chemical world, to biological world, to human world. It's a continuum, right? The from origin of universe to the today's Indian societies or any society, if you look at it, we can actually connect everything. It's nothing is sort of independent of each other, right? The current human world, even the so-called society, all the including the culture, we need to understand from a variety of different ways, right? Not all of them are biological, not all of them are cultural, right? But there is an influence of the external environment. There is an influence of both the biological and non-biological environment in our cultural practices too. So how to understand this require more interdisciplinary approach, and that is what is required in today's world. So we can start with a set of foundation courses, what Ashoka follows. And there's nothing like, you have to pick up this major and that minor without any bias. Anybody based on their interest can, select any particular discipline as major, or they can actually have a no major curriculum. They can have dual major or dual minor kind of thing. And research integrated pedagogy is very important. So students learn not only by, sitting in the classroom, they also learn by doing research. Same time, teachers, when they teach, they use methods of research while teaching. For example, how I teach my PhD student a particular problem before they start their PhD work. The same way we can actually have engage our undergraduate student. But there are methods because the scales are different. If I may talk to 2 PhD at a time, I may have to talk to 100 undergraduate students in the classroom. There are scalable methods for this. Experiential learning is extremely important, working on real life problems. Send them to the field. That's something which is part of the new education policy and in the liberal arts model. Practitioners of very different field in the society can be brought in. Media studies can be taught by practitioners of media, or similarly law. It can be, any societal work, NGOs, right? You can bring in some of those practitioners. Engaging with industry, community, natural ecosystem, they're all part of, in the higher education system. Not so to enable this to do, obviously you have to reduce the content in the syllabi, change the evaluation pattern, right? You should not worry too much about they have to go through this many number of courses to be called as a biologist and so forth. I already mentioned about integrated research with teaching. It is, for IITs, it's not so important. For college teachers, there's a challenge how to do this. There are multiple different ways of doing this. So we have, Ashok mentioned that some of the workshop that we organized is about, much before the NEP, is about how to bring in research in the classroom, how to bring in research into the colleges, without much expenses, almost no cost, no additional cost to this for the colleges, how to bring in research, and at the same time manage the at that time whatever the curriculum was, within the curriculum how to also bring in research. These are the kind of training we used to sort of organize for teachers. So, for example, in the classroom, the kind of way I do research, I can teach in the same way, right? So I use the method of research in the classroom teaching, not necessarily that they have to do actually a kind of research that our PhD students do, right? One advantage of it is many times we keep talking about values. So one of the things the NEP also wants the value to be certain kinds of values, right? Many of these things come automatically for researchers. Of course, I know research also there are exceptions. There are deviations. People manipulate data, plagiarize, and all those things. But largely, research community, basically their profession is based on honesty and integrity, right? And which basically leads to ethics and values automatically, including all kinds of, for example, how do they perceive the societal conflict? The people who are in full-time researchers perceive in a very different way than the others, right? Because if you look at the method of falsification as a mode of knowledge production, honesty is very important. Otherwise, how will you even falsify something, right? And so that's something which can be brought into classrooms. And open discussion and debates. And this is this is not meant for this audience. This is typically for college teachers. They now have to start learning to assess, because if they become more autonomous, and they will start assessing that. Once you know how to assess, you also know how to teach, because you know exactly what is the end result of the education that you are aiming for. Current method is you don't know what's the examination system, whose kind of questions are all. You have to struggle to teach, right? That's why you read out from the textbook rather than trying to teach something. Last part is most important in the Indian context. All our teachers should know the diversity in the classroom, and they should change their pedagogical methods almost once a week or once a month, catering to different sections in the classroom. There will be all kinds of diversity in the classroom, and that everybody should benefit, right? So you cannot use the same pedagogical method, because if the student don't show interest or understanding in the beginning of 1 or 2 weeks of the semester, the rest of the semester they will shut off. So it's very important that every student will gain something by using different pedagogical methods. I'll stop here. Thank you. We can have some questions.
Yeah, thank you, Shashidhara. So let us take some questions.
There are questions.
So there are some questions, I think. Rita?
Yes, so Professor Shashidhara, thank you so much for putting these very, very complex concepts in such simple terms. Questions have started coming in both on YouTube as well as WebEx. One of the questions is, will the NEP enable the students of technical education like engineering and architecture to take courses from social sciences and humanities? That's, I think, one of the questions that, of course, is worrying a lot of people, and especially if we are going towards liberal arts kind of education. So will it be a major, minor model? I guess there are also these very logistical issues on how to execute, but if you can just talk a little bit more about this possibility, this latent possibility in the NEP.
Okay, so I mean, when it comes to actual implementation, there will be some broad guidelines. I'm sure UGC will come up. For example, 4-year degree program for general education. Engineering is anyway already 4 education system. But what will happen now is there will be more customization possible, right? Every university, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So more customization is possible at the university level, if it is autonomous, even at the college level, which is engineering college, a medical college, or the general subject college. One way is you don't need to always have to have major minor, unless a degree certificate is required like that. We also don't know in the future, the kind of jobs we are talking about, the kind of employers we have, to what extent they give importance to the transcript, where it is clearly written that physics major on English literature minor, or architecture major and let's say performing arts minor, right? Because they may also look for subjects which are complementary, which adds value addition to their future profession. And in that context, people may want a specific combination of major minor, or it can be simply the student don't know what they want to learn. They don't know what would interest them most, and sort of walking around different discipline also helps. And that's what I think NEP is going to encourage in all colleges, whether it is technical colleges or the general subject colleges.
Okay, thanks. So the second question is about your observations on how to increase gross enrollment ratio in higher education. There are a few more related questions here from the same person. Our view on the capacity, I guess improving the capacity like infrastructure, lab hostel of school and higher education, and also your views on international curriculum.
Sure. So all put together, it's a challenge. Now, what currently government wants to do is to increase the opportunity for students to learn using online resources, particularly MOOCs and such kind of courses, and also credit sharing. So if I think there's some noise from somewhere. Yeah, sorry. Okay. So by using the credit sharing or using credit bank, all colleges will not be able to teach well in all disciplines. What the students can do is they go to some college, learn something, and go to another college, something else, depending on the strength of those colleges. So that's one way of, to increase the GER, the problem is, other than the physical infrastructure, is most important problem is the teachers. Where are the teachers, right? Because it's still not very attractive for general student in modern days to become teacher. Although the largest employer in this country are now basically the education system, right? We need so many teachers, school and higher education. In the absence of large number of teachers, one way is to sort of students walk around and pick up what they can learn the best from different places. So that way you can increase the GER. The second is, giving more autonomy to colleges, particularly private universities and so forth. And because philanthropy has just entered India, which is going to expand. And hopefully there will be more and more, the colleges and the universities will cater to the students. In fact, today already more than 60% of the students go to private colleges or universities. Only 40% of the higher education students are in the government system.
Yeah, so probably more questions will come, but I had another question, if you allow me. I was wondering, when we talk about education for all, are we kind of conflating two terms like literacy and education? And is it mostly, it's of course now
Sorry, I
when
can't
we
hear
talk
you.
about literacy.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just wondering, when we talk about universal education for all, are we kind of combining the two terms of literacy and education, where of course the term literacy has it has wider scope than just saying that I know how to read my name or write my name. The reason I'm asking this is also because this whole new concept of multiple exit entry system that has been inbuilt or into the NEP, that actually kind of defines the educational system that has been envisaged in the NEP document, that leaves the possibility of discontinuous education for some, right? With people moving in and coming back maybe at a later point, and also the probability that some students may not actually get the opportunity of ever coming back once they have entered the job market. So in that case, are we really trying to say that we are moving away from literacy for all to education for all, whereby education I mean critical thinking or the ability to do more the ability to transcend from school education to higher education. So while the intention of the multiple exit entry system is to bring dropouts into the system, into the education system, there's a possibility that that will lead to discontinuous education. So I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on whether that will also widen the gap between literacy and education, which to me is more about critical thinking.
Okay. So if you read the NEP, because today I only focused on the higher education. If you look at the school education component, if universal education is mostly meant for school education. Higher education, no, even in the most developed countries, higher education is only for select. In fact, you don't need, if you have a good, healthy society, where you need all kinds of people providing the social good, right? And through a variety of different professions, whether it is farmer or running a business or running the government or industries. For example, in US, it's I think something like between 60 to 70. And 80% in small European countries, because the population is low, they can afford. Even in places like Japan or any place, it's all UK and all somewhere between 60 to 70. China is about 36% as of now. So you don't need everybody to go through higher education. If you think that everybody has to go through higher education, it's actually not a good society in a way. Because what it also reflects that our school education is extremely bad, that higher education is the only way to provide education. But if you improve the school education up to 12th standard, right? And if that education is supposed to be universal, then later a select few will come to higher education because they need some specialized skills, particularly the kind of skills that are required for addressing the bigger problem of the society, which collectively one has to address, not as individual. Now, coming back to the school education, particularly in the context of universal learning, reading and writing the names, literacy, which have already moved away from that. The minimum goal we have set for school education now is digital skills. You must have heard a lot about this in the NEP also, because modern days, no one can live, with certain dignity without having some amount of digital skills, right? And if if the world is moving more and more digital, if all transactions happen digital, if you are not educated well, right, only literacy will not help. Either they'll get exploited if you do not have sufficient digital skills. In fact, in school education, I'm also more worried that unless our teachers provide those digital skills, exploitation will increase among the people who do not have those digital skills. So digital skills have to become an important aspect of the school education and not simply literacy, right?
Thank you. I think we are done. It's already 1 p.m. And I would now hand it over to Professor Ganguly to a thank you note.
Yeah, Professor Shashidhara, it was very nice to hear how NEP is going to, go to the schools and how it will affect our school education and the differences between the impact on the school and the higher education. So I think several such discussions will have to take place while we roll out an implementation plan. And I think thanks from all of us at IIT Delhi for you to take time out from your busy schedule. And we thank all the viewers who have joined us through WebEx and also by YouTube. And this, of course, all these recordings will be available, and we will use this later in discussions. And we are also having panel discussions. So we had, I think, 1 or 2 panel discussions already. We'll have some more panel discussions. So thank you, Professor Shashidhara, for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you. It was an
Bye-bye.
honor. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you all.